Well, it's lunch hour, Lisa and Darla, so let's respect everybody's valuable time and launch the session. My name's Tony Gioventu. I'm the Executive Director of CHOA, and we're hosting the session in partnership with Lisa from Westerhoff Climate Solutions and our partner Darla Simpson from the Zero Emissions Innovation Center, which you also know as the BC Retrofit Accelerator. So we have a series of partnerships through a number of agencies and
On
funding that helps to extend the services that we can provide to all of our members. So very glad to have everyone today. We just as a brief little privacy moment, Lisa, in the next slide, just to remind everyone, you can put your questions in the chat. We will deal with them as we get to the end of the presentations so that we can just let everything run smoothly. But don't put personal information into the Q&A or into the chat. It can potentially be exposed to other parties. So first names are great. Your name is fine by participating. And also the chat that you would put in and the Q&A at the end won't be recorded in the session. So it's the information of this seminar that you're going to have recorded in the session. So other than that, Lisa, we'll just pop it right over to you and you can start with your presentation and then pass it on to Darla.
Thanks so much, Tony, and thank you all for joining today. It's wonderful to be here. So as Tony said, my name is Lisa Westerhoff of Westerhoff Climate Strategies, and I'm pleased to give you an overview presentation of Cooler Condos, how strata councils and residents can address overheating risk and why they should, which is a new resource that's been recently released that is intended to provide strata council members and condo owners with accessible information on overheating risks, both to their buildings and to the people within them. So just to clarify, this guide is intended for two key audiences. First of all, British Columbia condominium owners and residents who are interested in reducing the risk of overheating in their suites, and who also might want to bring some suggestions and concerns to their strata council about overheating. And it's also intended for strata councils themselves who might be interested in learning more about the risks of overheating and the solutions that are available to address them. So what I want to clarify here is that this guide is focused on measures that owners or council members can take to proactively reduce overheating risk at the building level. So while we do kind of point to some other resources that talk about emergency response or emergency management measures, things like what to do when you're actually overheating in your building, it's not the focus of this guide. So we do point to the resources that are covering that in more detail, and they're very important to be familiar with. But we're really just focusing on things that one can do proactively at the building scale. And we're also not talking about things like community cooling measures. So adding green space to parks or misting stations, things like that. So a way to start here is to highlight two key terms that I've actually already been using and that I'll be using throughout the rest of this presentation and that are also highlighted in the guide. First, we talk a lot about extreme heat events, and these are events that occur when daytime and nighttime temperatures will steadily increase day by day until they significantly exceed seasonal norms. So what often happens during these extreme heat events, or heat waves we often call them, is that temperatures inside will often start to exceed temperatures outside, especially overnight. A related concept that I'll be using a lot is of building overheating. So this is a phenomenon that happens when buildings or inside buildings, when heat builds up inside of a unit or a building itself faster than it can be removed. And that's for multiple reasons. Maybe there's limited ventilation, or maybe there's no source of active cooling. Also, buildings with poor insulation or even rooftop ventilation systems can sometimes make building overheating worse as they're kind of bringing heat directly into the building. So those are two key concepts to keep in mind as I walk through the rest of the guide. Once they're defined, those key terms, the guide will then provide a summary of information that we've gathered from a range of different studies that points to the kinds of buildings and the individual suites within those buildings that are at greatest risk of overheating. So what we've learned from past events like the heat dome back in 2021 is that the buildings that are most vulnerable to extreme heat events are often located in what's known as an urban heat island, which is an area that tends to be with less vegetation, so less tree cover, and that has more extensive paving that sort of captures and holds on to heat. These buildings are the ones that are at highest risk are also those that don't have a source of active or mechanical cooling. They might also be poorly ventilated, as I mentioned, and they may also have sort of not very great insulation. In terms of suites or units that might be at greatest risk of overheating or that are most heat vulnerable, those are the ones that are located on the upper floors of a building. They're mostly those that have large south or west facing windows that don't have shading over top of them. Sometimes these units are also only facing one direction and they either have one window or no windows that open. So we can't get a source of cross ventilation moving through the suite or the unit. And of course, they also lack a source of mechanical cooling or air conditioning. So in addition to the buildings and the units that are at greatest risk, the guide also talks about who is at greatest risk. So who is most affected by building overheating. And so what we want to emphasize here and in the guide is that while extreme heat events can affect everybody, there are certain kinds of more heat vulnerable residents or communities that we need to pay special attention to. So you can see that these are the ones on the screen here. So we have folks who are 65 years or older, or who may have pre-existing or chronic health conditions, those who are pregnant or infants and young children, those coping with mental illnesses or with substance use disorders, and those with limited mobility or those living alone. So those are the folks who are at greatest risk. And it's not to say that they just experience, more discomfort. They can actually be at greater risk of much worse health outcomes, including increased mortality. And you also see on the slide here that pets are also at risk. So it's important to think about their well-being as well. So what can we actually do about building overheating? So this is what most of the guide focuses on. And at a very high level, there are 4 categories of measures and specific options within those categories that we cover. And so that includes implementing active cooling, reducing incoming heat and improving airflow, providing cooling to common spaces, and taking interim action at the suite level. And so for each of these, the Cooler Condos Guide gives you a range of different options that we also rank in terms of their overall effectiveness. And we give a little bit of detail on certain sort of key considerations to keep in mind if you're thinking about implementing a measure like this. What I want to emphasize at this point, though, is that as temperatures continue to increase, we really want to think about these as a combination of measures. No one set of measures is going to necessarily reduce the risk of building overheating entirely. We want to think about these in combination wherever possible. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail. I'm not going to have a lot of time to go into detail on each one, but I'll just give you a little bit of a sense of what we cover. So the first group of measures is all about adding active cooling. This is by far the most effective group of measures. These are systems that use electricity that move heat from one space to another, sort of like a refrigerator. And while most residential buildings are being constructed with a source of active or mechanical cooling now, most older buildings don't have one. So it's something that we want to consider. One thing that we do note in the guide is that many people do, when we talk about air conditioning or cooling, they think about air conditioners, right? But we also flag in this guide that air conditioners can be somewhat limited. They only provide cooling, for example, whereas a heat pump can provide heating and cooling. And so we provide a little bit of guidance on when you might consider an air conditioner in a sort of temporary manner versus a heat pump. And we also sort of suggest that if you're exploring a heating system replacement, that you might consider a heat pump system because it can provide both heating and cooling. The second group of options includes what we call passive measures. And so those are measures that help reduce incoming heat and solar radiation and improve airflow. So what this group of measures includes is things like replacing windows that don't open with windows that do open. Or you can add shades that are outside of the building or even on the inside of the building, but that will help block the sun's rays. So keep that solar radiation from entering your suite at all. So these kinds of measures are most effective when we pair them with an active cooling system because they help reduce the incoming heat, and that makes it so that your cooling system, your active cooling system, like your heat pump or your air conditioner, doesn't have to work so hard. So it improves its longevity and its effectiveness. But unlike those active cooling measures, passive measures don't actually need electricity to run. And so they're actually really important and useful during power outages, for example, if you are in an area that experiences power outages. They also work very well during periods of more seasonal weather, like shoulder seasons, like the spring or fall, and as well during more sort of moderate summer temperatures. The third category of measures that we explore in the guide speaks to the addition of active cooling, but this time in shared common spaces. So we consider these in the guide to be sort of partial or interim measures to explore. It includes things like adding cooling to the air that might be delivered to hallways or to a common area or a lobby. So doing something like this, it won't necessarily cool the your units or your suites directly. It's sort of an indirect support in reducing the risk of building overheating. But it's definitely something to explore, especially if you have a centralized system that could be modified. It's really important if you are exploring this option to try to coordinate that common area ventilation and any kind of roofing upgrades. That's a good way to start helping to reduce costs and protect your roof performance and warranty coverages. If you're adding it to a common area like a recreation room, for example, it's important to make sure that you have a space that is suitable for that, that it's accessible to everyone in the building, and that it can double as what we call a cooling refuge effectively. And then, so while those first three categories of measures that I've just described require some form of strata corporation approval, the guide also covers those measures that owners or residents can independently use to reduce the risk of overheating. And that's by making minor adjustments to their suite. So these are not likely to require strata approval, which makes them easier to implement. They're also lower cost typically, which makes them more accessible to a broad range of folks. And so this includes things like installing reflective blinds. You can use the exhaust fan in your bathroom or in your kitchen to help expel hot air to the outside. You can flush hot air out of your unit at nighttime by opening your windows up and letting that cool air come in, and then closing your windows in the morning so that you don't let the hot air back in. So these are kind of important measures to consider that do help to reduce overheating risk, but they won't eliminate it entirely. When it's very, very hot out, when we have an extreme heat event, they're not likely to be effective in all cases. So we just want to flag that as well, that these are sort of stopgap measures, but still important things that folks can do. So the guide finally concludes with some steps that both owners and residents can take to reduce their overheating risk. So we really emphasize that the first thing is to get engaged. You want to think about where and how you and maybe even your neighbors might be at risk of overheating, and what you and your strata council might be able to do to support your neighbors or to help address that risk. If you think that your building might be at risk of overheating, we give a little bit of guidance on how you can start to document that by measuring the temperature of your suite so that you have data to support any requests that you might make of your council or your strata for consideration. And if you think you fall into one of those categories of at-risk communities, people who are over 65 with chronic health conditions, etc., you could talk to your doctor to see if you even require or can access a free or deeply discounted source of mechanical cooling by way of an air conditioner. And then finally, if you think that your suite or building might benefit from an upgrade to reduce your overheating risk, you might think about conducting a survey to see if other owners are also concerned. You might look at your local utility or your municipal website to see if there's any rebates or offers that might be available to you. And of course, you want to share this handbook with your strata council and bring the concerns up. If you are a Strata Council member, we also provide some key first steps for you. There's a number of options that you can consider. Firstly, you might just want to hold a meeting to talk about overheating risks and understand if there are folks in the building who are experiencing overheating. It can become a heated conversation, no pun intended. So do be, wary of that or cognizant of that this can be quite an affecting experience for people. You might think about developing an extreme heat preparedness plan or even implementing a neighbor check program so that when temperatures start to rise, you know who might be at risk and you can go and check in on them. And you have a plan to implement when it gets hot. You can think about reviewing and amending any of your existing bylaws, especially if they restrict heat pumps or air conditioners. So if you don't already have a bylaw that touches on heat pump and air conditioner installation, you can work with a lawyer to draft a new bylaw for inclusion in the notice of a general meeting. And the bylaw should outline how and where heat pumps and air conditioners are permitted. You can complete and consult your electrical planning report, which I believe Darla is also going to speak to in a moment. And this is really important to make sure that you're sort of thinking about any current and future electrical needs and how to plan for those alongside any addition of active cooling. And then finally, you want to maybe reach out to the Strata Energy Advisor program for support. And that is exactly who I'm going to turn it over to in just a moment. But before I do, I just want to thank everybody for their attention. And I also want to encourage everyone to visit the website, grab and download a copy of the Cooler Condos Guide. You can scan the QR code here right now. And I also want to shout out to the many, many partners, not all of whom are shown here, but many folks who made this work possible either through funding or through advisory support. So many thanks to them. And that is it for me. So I will now pass it over to Darla from the Zero Emissions Innovation Center.
Thanks so much, Lisa. The Strata Energy Advisor Program. This program is really here to help strata councils who are looking at tackling those bigger mechanical measures in their buildings. So in the context of overheating, we get lots of requests about adding cooling to make up air units, to have cooling in our corridors, interest in adding in-suite heat pumps, or even just understanding what the impact of adding in-suite heat pumps might be. So the Strata Energy Advisor Program is really here to help strata councils make those sorts of questions. Sorry, losing my words. To answer those sorts of questions in an informed way so they know what they're getting into right from the start. So we're here to help you plan for that upcoming retrofit, really modernize and electrify your buildings where it's appropriate, and prepare for a change in climate. And that includes accessing all the rebates and resources that are available to strata councils. And the best part is it's also 100% free. So we don't charge stratas for this at all. Next slide. And that's in large part due to our fantastic funders. So Metro Vancouver with seed funding, Natural Resources Canada providing the bulk of the funding. And then we also have municipalities like Victoria and Saanich that help us to reach even greater numbers of buildings and smaller strata councils. Next slide. So who is eligible? So the Strata Energy Advisor Program right now is only able to support multi-unit residential buildings. So that's the condo style buildings in BC. Unfortunately, ground-oriented townhomes and multiplexes are not currently eligible unless you're part of a larger multi-unit building. I will say this is a bit confusing and folks don't always know exactly where they land. So I encourage you to go to strataenergyadvisorbc.ca. You can take a little registration quiz to find out which program might work for you, or you can just sign up for our program and our staff will take a look at your building and your projects and we'll let you know which programs you're eligible for. We really want to make this low barrier for folks to access. In addition to the actual formal programs, we have a lot of resources on that page, including the Cool Condos Guide. So it's a great resource for stratas writ large. And next slide. So when you sign up for the Strata Energy Advisor Program, what do you get? What's the benefit? So the biggest part is we will assign a dedicated Strata Energy Advisor to your strata. They can help you navigate electrical planning reports, understanding what they're saying. Through our partnership with the Condominium Homeowners Association, we can support you with bylaw changes. So understanding what bylaws might need to be updated, what you might want to include in those bylaws to make sure that the Strata Corporation is protected. Finding a contractor, again, accessing those rebates. And we can also help with those information meetings and just helping your strata lot owners understand why you're pursuing this pathway, why it might be in their interest, and again, making that informed decision when it comes time to invest in your building. For those folks that are interested, As part of our funded program, we also help you prepare for any reporting requirements in the Capital Regional District or City of Vancouver by setting up an Energy Star Portfolio Manager account. We'll come to your building, we'll do a little investigation to learn more, and then we can prepare a report to help you understand your options. And that's not just for your upcoming retrofit, be that in-suite heat pumps or a larger retrofit that you're looking at, but also looking at aligning the projects with your depreciation report. So you can be thinking ahead about all of these different opportunities that you may have to help reduce the overheating risk in your building, and kind of approaching or tackling them at the right time in your building's life cycle in order to keep those costs low. Next slide. And so that comes to just kind of a little bit of a PSA about electrical planning reports. So I'm guessing most people on this call know that in the Capital Regional District, Metro Vancouver, and in the Fraser Valley, all stratas of 5 lots or more are required to complete an electrical planning report by the end of this year. If you're outside those regions, that's the deadline for you is December 2028. And these are really important for buildings, particularly buildings that may have gas heating or gas hot water and are looking to electrify those systems. So this just helps you plan ahead and be smart where you're investing your electrical capacity. And if you do have constraints, to make those decisions in advance about how you're going to pursue that. And that may mean some challenging decisions about maybe only adding cooling to the suites that need it most, or thinking about how to manage the electrical load in your building so that you're not causing any issues that may bubble up as problems in the future. So again, we can help you kind of interpret your electrical planning reports, understand what they mean, and understand what your options are in terms of implementing some of the measures that you may want to tackle to cool your buildings. Next slide. So one of the biggest questions we often get are the rebates available to multi-unit residential buildings. And I'm really pleased that for the first time, we do have some rebates available for our condo owners. So there's kind of 3 big pools that you can look at. One are the whole building rebates. So these are all offered through BC Hydro, or administered by BC Hydro, and they're jointly supported by BC Hydro and Clean BC. But they'll help you with an opportunity assessment to figure out what your options are in your building. There's up to $30,000 to complete a feasibility study to implement whatever retrofit project you're aiming for. And this does include something like a heat pump adoption plan for your building, if that's what you want to invest in. So that can look at a strategy for your entire building to install those in-suite heat pumps, including answering some of those really sticky questions about where are we going to put the units, how are we going to put the holes through the wall, all those sorts of details. So that funding does exist and is available to you. And then, of course, there's equipment rebates for various heat pumps. And these are at the building scale. So typically, we're looking for about 25% of the units minimum to participate in the whole building program. If that's not going to work for you, there are in-suite rebates as well. So this is for individuals who want to pursue this, knowing that they will still require the permission of their strata council to install those in-suite heat pumps. And so it may be an advantage to engage your strata council early in that conversation. For anybody that might be on the income qualified end of things, there is also the Clean BC Energy Savings Programs that has even higher incentives for eligible participants. And then there's some great resources and rebates available to you that are kind of adjacent to the retrofit side of things. So if you're looking at EV charging for EV ready plans, EV ready infrastructure, there's solar PV rebates, there's battery storage rebates. There are tons of resources available for you if you're looking at tackling the efficiency of your building writ large. And I know that we probably have some folks that are in townhomes or bareland stratas. There are also rebates available for you. Unfortunately, they're not through the MERB program, but they are through the I'm just going to make sure I get the title right. So the home renovation rebate program. So this is the program designed for single family homeowners, but is also available to those in townhomes that are looking at replacing the systems in their own units. Last slide. So I'm going to echo a lot of what Lisa's already said. And the most important piece here is to just start talking. Talk with your neighbors, talk with your strata council, understand what retrofits are coming up, but also ask who's having overheating issues. We do hear a lot from folks like overheating is not a problem in our building, but when they start talking, they realize it's not a problem in my unit, but it is a problem in our building and we need to get prepared. And then explore your options. What are your priority projects? What are the timelines you're talking about? What are the rebates available to you? And kind of come together to understand what your next step might be. And this could include creating a committee that wants to tackle this directly. And then sign up for the SEA program. We're here when you're ready. We're free for eligible buildings. And all you have to do is sign up at strataenergyadvisorbc.ca.